go ahead and get the recording. Woo, got the recording going. All right, so perfect. So welcome everyone. My name is Melissa Roscup. I use they, them pronouns, and I am with the Community Foundation of South Puget Sound. Today I'm excited to share with you our guests we have from Three Girls Media. They are going to be presenting on a topic of utilizing PR and media relations. And before I let them take over, I do have a couple of like housekeeping sort of notes. The first is that, yes, we are recording this session, so you can come back and view it whenever you want. If you don't want your image or your audio recorded at any point, feel free to turn those off, though we do love to see your faces and hear your voices, because it has been kind of a, up and down year with lots of Zooming and other virtual connections. And so always feel free to do that. We also have closed captioning. I do believe, because I can't see what you see, at least not exactly. It's supposed to be set right now to live transcript where everyone should be able to see it. Perfect. And so if for whatever reason you aren't, there should be a button on the bottom of your screen that can let you have like subtitle settings, and you can turn those on if you're not viewing them right now. But we will also be including the transcript in the materials that are going to be provided with this video recording as well. And so I also want to let people know that we do have 2 other workshops coming up here soon. The next one is next week for folks who are registered for Give Local or are interested in participating in Give Local. I'm going to be doing a quick walkthrough of how to set up your campaign on our platform. So that way you can kind of get a visual of seeing it like in person, and you can ask some questions and I can kind of help folks kind of guide through that. If you can't attend that one, no worries. There is going to be another walkthrough in October. So the one next week though is going to be next Thursday. So a week from today, it's going to be from 5 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. So it's going to be an evening one. So folks need to do it after work or whatever. But the other one will be, I do believe, in the morning time in October. So if that one works better for you, go ahead and sign up for that. We also have on August 25th from 1 to 2:30 p.m. My colleague who is unable to attend today and our Director of Community Programs, Dacia, is going to be doing a Fundraising for Humans workshop. So kind of talking about like humanizing your fundraising efforts and making sure that, you're not just like going with like focusing on like transactions and being like, oh, well, seeing donors as just like money, which I assume none of you are. This kind of helps people get a little bit more of that language on how to make sure to, build those relationships a little bit. So with that, the final piece that I wanted to go up with is that we do have 2 grant cycles open currently right now that you can find at the communityfoundation.com website. There is our Resilience Fund grant is still opened, and it's on a rolling basis. That one is addressing long-term effects of COVID-19, and those grant fundings go up to $30,000. Then we have our community grant cycle, which is open until August 27th. And that one is basically for anything. It's mostly general operating funds. You're basically kind of just like sharing what your organization does, and I guess not so much telling us like why you need the money, but just like, oh, here, this is what we're doing with the money. And then our committee will kind of read through all of that and pass out. And the grants only go up to $5,000. And furthermore, which is exciting about it this year, is we did open up our community grants evaluation process. And if you or your colleagues or a friend or a family member is interested in serving on our grants committee for the community grants, we are accepting volunteer interest forms right now, which I will post that link in the chat box in a minute. So yeah, if you want to go ahead, and we are, as I say, if you are interested, we are opening up, nonprofits can participate as well this year. You just obviously will not be evaluating your own application or a strong partner of yours. But yeah, you get to kind of see a little bit more of like how this process works, how the decisions are kind of made. Because I know like with all of you, when we've submitted grants for the community foundation before, I don't know what happens after we submit it. Like, we just wait until eventually we're told, yes, we got the money, or no, we didn't get the money, or here, have a little bit of money, but I don't know what happened in between. So this is your opportunity to kind of learn a little bit more about what happens in that. And with that, that is all the housekeeping I have, which I feel like I was talking forever, but hopefully wasn't boring anybody too much. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to the CEO of Three Girls Media, Erika Montgomery.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. It's so great to see many new faces that I haven't seen in these workshops before and see some returning faces as well. My name is Erika Taylor Montgomery, and as Melissa said, I'm the founder and CEO of Three Girls Media. We're a full-service marketing and public relations agency, and I am fortunate enough to be sort of in my second career these days. My initial career right out of college was broadcasting. I was a journalist and on air in San Francisco for over 22 years before I ultimately transitioned to marketing and public relations, which I have been doing ever since. And so that background as a journalist will really become relevant in today's talk as we're discussing how to work with the media specifically. And I'm excited to present that topic to you. And joining me today for the presentation is Shanae Bemis. Shanae is the Senior Director of Marketing and PR here at Three Girls.
Good morning, everyone. As Erika said, I'm the Senior Director of Marketing and PR at Three Girls Media, and I also come from a journalistic background. I got my degree in digital journalism and was a working journalist for some time, and then made the transition over to marketing. And my journalism training and professional experience there has served me very well, and I'm excited to share that experience with you today.
So just a little bit about who Three Girls Media is. Like I mentioned, we're a full service marketing and PR agency, and we're based right here in Thurston County. We're headquartered in Rainier, and we offer all kinds of services and work with a lot of different nonprofits with usually very slim budgets. So I know that's often a concern for nonprofit organizations is, can we afford any marketing help? And I can assure you that it is possible. So we offer all kinds of content marketing, including social media management, branding. We do blogging for search engine optimization, public and media relations, email marketing, advertising of all different kinds, website design and build, strategic social media management, and a lot of other services. So if you ever decide that you need any help with these things, we do offer a complimentary 30-minute consultation, and I can talk to you a little bit more about that later. But let's dive into the presentation.
So today we will be going over a few different things, and those include creating media lists and media pitches, the difference between a media pitch and a press release, all about electronic press kits, also known as EPKs, how to actually build a media list, and then general tips for working with the media.
So let's talk about media pitching. A lot of people don't understand exactly what a media pitch is, and its simple definition is some kind of outreach, most commonly an email, that's sent to a member of the media, and it outlines in brief a story idea that the journalist or media outlet may be interested in. And then once you have your pitch written and together, you're going to send that out to the contacts that are on your media list. And a media list, it might seem obvious, but it's simply a list or database of the media outlets that you want to send your media pitch to in hopes of getting your story picked up by the news.
So when it comes to actually writing a media pitch, there's a few things you should always keep in mind. Number one, write an eye-catching subject line. As Erika just mentioned, pitches are usually sent out via email, so they'll come into a journalist's inbox with a subject line and then the body of the email. And it's really important that your subject line is not only eye-catching, so it'll catch their attention, but also gives them the information they need to know right off the bat. So it includes the actual topic of whatever your pitch is, and it also lets them know that it is a pitch. When we send out pitches at Three Girls Media, we often will begin the subject line with the word pitch in all capital letters, followed by a colon, and then the actual subject line. And that just gives them additional information and lets them know right off the bat that this is a pitch, it's a story idea, and if they're needing a story idea, that will get their attention very quickly. We also recommend opening with a hook. So this means that when you start writing the copy for the body of your pitch, you want to make sure that the first sentence really catches attention, really shares the important information of your pitch, and will keep their attention going throughout the rest of the copy. We also recommend utilizing the inverted pyramid model of writing, and that is primarily used in journalism. And the idea there is that all of the most important information should be at the very top of whatever you're writing. And this just means that if somebody doesn't actually make it to the bottom of your pitch, they still get all of the most important information. And this is very important for journalists because they're very busy people. They're most likely going to quickly skim your pitch to see if it's something they're interested in. And during that skim, if they can't pick out the most important details quickly, they're going to move on. So getting everything you need right at the top really helps make sure that they're going to focus in and can help you get that media coverage that you need. It's also important to add a timely element. So this is fairly obvious with things like events or campaigns that are only going to be running for a certain amount of time, or any like an award that you just won and you want to share the information about. Those have a kind of intrinsic timely element. So you can include that timely element, say, recent award or campaign ending in June, or any kind of timely words like that to give the journalist information, knowing, this is something that just happened or something that's only going to be happening for a certain amount of time, so they know they need to jump on it right away. That being said, even with topics that are a little bit less timely, you can still include that information or that kind of language to make a journalist be more interested in jumping on something right away. We also always recommend offering either, samples of, something that you put together for your audience, or maybe it's just more information. Always offer them something more so that if they need more information for their article, or if they need something, to get their hands on something, they don't have to come to you to ask. You're already offering that right off the bat, and they know exactly who they need to contact to get that. We always also recommend utilizing statistics. Journalists are very numbers oriented people. And the more information that you can share, 75% of people, et cetera, that is very important, and it will they'll want to include that in their article. So by including that information, it makes their lives easier, and they don't have to come to you and say, hey, what are the actual statistics that back up the information you sent over? We also recommend being polite. This is pretty self-explanatory, but journalists are very busy people, as previously mentioned, and the easier you can make their lives, the more likely they'll want to work with you, not only right off the bat, but again in the future. So by being polite and respectful in your communication with them, they'll be more interested in working with you again in the future. And then finally, proofread, proofread, proofread. This is incredibly important, and it really just goes back to making their lives easier. If you send out a pitch to journalists that has typos, grammatical errors, maybe information that's incorrect, they're going to need to go in and correct that, or you might even be in a situation where that incorrect information gets included in an article. You have to contact the journalists, have them change it, and it's just a whole mess. So by proofreading before you send everything out, you know that journalists won't have to make those edits on their side when they're getting ready to put their story together, and you don't run the risk of incorrect information being sent out to the media.
So let's talk about some free tools that you can use when it comes to media pitching. And I know that nonprofit organizations love the word free. And so these are all things that you can get with the couple clicks of a mouse. The first is Help a Reporter Out, which is also known in the PR and advertising industry as HARO for short. You can find that online by simply going to helpareporter.com, or you could simply do a Google search for Help a Reporter Out. Again, that URL is helpareporter.com. Thank you, Melissa, for putting it in the chat window. So what Help a Reporter Out is simply an aggregate of all kinds of queries from journalists looking for sources, information, tools, things that they need for stories that they are actively working on. So this is actually a journalist coming to the public and saying, we need help with these stories. Do you have information that we may be able to utilize? We're looking for this type of person to interview, or this kind of organization to profile, or these kinds of products that we may want to showcase in our story. And with Help a Reporter Out, they have a requirement of any media outlet that puts a query out must have a minimum of 1 million in circulation, viewership, readership, website traffic. There's got to be some common denominator of 1 million. So these are very large media outlets. Think things like the Los Angeles Times, USA Today, NBC Nightly News, Women's Day Magazine. These are very large, usually national or very large regional media outlets that are looking for resources. And these come to you as an email. There are 3 versions of Help a Reporter Out that come out a day. There's a morning edition, an afternoon edition, and an evening edition. And these are East Coast time. And you simply sign up and they come right into your email box. You can also sign up for a daily, a once a day feed, so you don't get 3 separate emails, but I don't recommend that. And I'll tell you why. Because these are large outlets and they're looking for sources and usually on deadline, the competition is fierce. You don't want to wait until tomorrow to respond. You want to look at these emails as soon as they come into your inbox, scan them. It won't take you more than 5 minutes at the most to scan these emails and look what the sources are looking for, and see if you have something that you might be able to offer them. And if you can, you want to respond immediately. Most of these have a hard deadline, and if you respond past the deadline, the response literally will not get sent to the journalist. So timeliness is absolutely key here. But it's an amazing way that you could potentially get some really fantastic large-scale media coverage for your organization, and it's the journalist coming to you. Now, pitch rate is exactly the same as Help a Reporter Out. The only difference is that it has a mix of small, medium, and large media outlets that are looking for resources. But it's also free. You simply can do a Google search for pitch rate, or I believe it's pitchrate.com is the URL. And this email comes to you once a day. It's another free resource. And again, timeliness is key when you're looking at scanning these emails and responding to them. Don't let them sit in your inbox. And then HubSpot is another wonderful resource that you can use for building a media list. HubSpot has a free version of a CRM, which is a great way to create a database of media outlets and journalists that you may want to work with for your nonprofit organization. They also have a paid version, but the free version is really very powerful and should give you everything that you need. And it's easier than trying to, keep something, say, for example, in an Excel spreadsheet or something like that. So I'd highly recommend the free version of HubSpot for you.
Okay, so once you have your media pitch written and you're looking to send it out, it's time to get your media list together. And there are multiple ways to do this. And the way that we're going to be discussing today is the free way, the way that kind of the manual way. There are tools out there that you can use where they have their own databases of journalists. You go in there, you pull from their database to put together your list, and you go from there. However, those are paid tools and are quite expensive, especially for organizations with smaller budgets. So we'll be talking about how you can do this without these paid tools. And the first thing to do when you're getting your media list put together is define your pitch angle. And if you've already written your pitch, you already have this down. But if you're starting to put your media list together and you haven't written your pitch yet, it's still really important to keep in mind what the topic of your pitch is and make sure that that actually lines up with what your media list is going to be. So for example, if you're writing a pitch that is about healthcare, you want to make sure that your media list includes outlets and journalists who write about healthcare. You don't want to be pulling a bunch of journalists who write about something either totally different or they're kind of a more general contact, because they're not going to be as interested in the information you're sending over. So it's just really important to keep both pieces in mind and ensure that they are both pointed in the same direction. You also want to keep editorial timing in mind, as well as lead times. And we'll go into this more here in a few minutes. But for now, what I'll say is it's important to keep in mind that journalists have their own timetables, and they work further ahead than you might think. So if you're looking to share information about an event that's coming up in a month, you're already right when you need to be sending that information out, if not much sooner than that. So be working ahead and keep in mind that journalists will often work ahead. You also want to be selective when you're pulling different contacts. You want to keep the outlet size and type in mind. And this also goes back to what I was speaking about with your pitch angle. You want to be pulling outlets that make sense for the industry that you're in and the topic of whatever your pitch is. And you also want to keep their size in mind. And this is important, especially for maybe smaller organizations that are just local or maybe just regional. It's much easier to start with either local or regional media, start pitching to them, and then from there move on to national media. The buzz that you create with your local and regional outlets will help get the national outlets, which are much more competitive and a lot harder to get their attention. It'll help get them more interested if they see there's already been media coverage on whatever the topic of your pitch is. We also always recommend double checking your resources. So if you're using Haro or PitchRate and you notice there's a certain journalist who's continually putting out requests for interviews that apply to you, or maybe they're looking for information that again applies to you or your organization, they're going to be a good person to add to your media list. So keeping an eye on that and looking for these patterns is a really great way to beef up your media list and ensure that every single person that could be interested is on your media list. And then make your list, check it twice. This is very important for organizations that are sending out pitches frequently, because you never want to end up sending a pitch to somebody who isn't interested and sending it over and over and getting no response. It's important to keep who's on your pitch. You know, if you've ever received an email back from their email address saying, you know, this person no longer works here or anything like that, you want to go in and edit your list as you get these responses back, as well as going in and making sure that when you pull your list, all of the emails are correct. You didn't make any typos when you're copy and pasting it into your Excel sheet or whatever, or maybe you're using the CRM from HubSpot. Make sure those things are in there accurately and you're updating them as time goes on. All right, and then as I mentioned before, the way we're discussing media lists today is a manual way of putting them together. And the easiest way to do this is to just go to the news resources that you're interested in working with and going to their website. And at the bottom of the page, often in that little bottom bar where it has, you know, contact information, or sometimes it's other kind of legal information for the website, they'll have links to lists of newsroom staff or information for submitting stories or other kind of basic contact resources. And those are going to be the emails that you want to add to your list. The best situation is to get individual emails for their reporters, which if they have a list of newsroom staff, you can do. But even just an info at or a submit a story at email is still a good thing to include on your media list. It's also best to pitch lower level staff and not managers, CEOs, executive directors, because the people who are coming up with these story ideas are lower on the totem pole. they're the people who go to meetings every week and are required to come with a certain amount of story ideas in hand. So by pitching these people, they need the story ideas. They're going to take them to their meetings and they're going to pitch them to their editors, who will give them the go ahead to move forward with your story idea.
And another place that you can actually find contact information often for the media is if you're reading a story in the newspaper or maybe on a website. Often at the end of the story, there's a sentence or two biography of the journalist who's written the story. And often they include an email address or a link to email them. And that's someplace else that you can look, especially if you're following someone that you know normally covers the area that your nonprofit works in. Say, for example, healthcare. If they're a healthcare reporter, you may want to start looking at who covers healthcare news in your local newspaper, and then make sure that you grab their email address. So let's talk a little bit about an editorial calendar and what it is. Sinead, did you want to take this one?
Sure. So an editorial calendar is a content and interaction plan, which is designed to help with pitch planning and follow-up. Essentially what this is a calendar that outlets put together to plan what their quarter or first 6 months of the year or even the full year is going to look like, as far as the major stories that they're going to be planning. So for a magazine, that has a monthly distribution, it will be, what is the main topic of each magazine distribution going to be. If it's a weekly newspaper, it might be their big feature editions. If it's like a daily newspaper, it might even get a little bit more specific. But these are really easy to get your hands on. Most websites will actually have them online, most outlets may have them online, or if they don't have them online, you can just go ahead and email them and request the editorial calendar and they'll send it over. So this is a really great way to know in advance when they're going to be talking about things that apply to you and will be most receptive of your story ideas.
All different types of media outlets have editorial calendars, everything from magazines to newspapers to websites and blogs. Most of them plan out their feature content many months in advance, if not at least several weeks. So editorial calendars are something very common in the journalistic world. And like Shanae said, you can simply email the outlet, main news or info at email address to get one, or you can simply pick up the phone and call the front desk, and whoever answers at reception should be able to point you in the right direction to get you an editorial calendar. So let's talk a little bit about lead times. So we've mentioned this before, and a lead time is simply the amount of time a journalist is working on a story or a feature in advance of its actual publication or air date. And a lot of people are really surprised how far journalists work in advance. So your major monthly magazines, things like your major women's magazines that you may subscribe to, or cooking magazines or health magazines, or these type of publications, work on a 4 to 6 month lead time. So that means that right now in August, many of these publications like First for Women and Red Book and these types of magazines are working on their November and December issues for the holidays. So if you have some major event happening around the holidays, or you think the holidays would be a really good time for publication for a story about your organization and you're shooting to get in magazines, right now is when you need to be pitching them. Newspapers are a little bit shorter lead time. They generally work 6 to 8 weeks for feature stories. Obviously, if it's breaking news, those stories can be up online in a matter of hours on a newspaper website or be featured the next day or within a couple of days. But for the larger features they work on, it's generally 6 to 8 weeks out. Websites and blogs are generally 4 to 6 weeks. TV and radio is 1 to 2 weeks. And for podcasts, it's about 2 to 4 months. And podcasts are something that I think a lot of nonprofit organizations really overlook in terms of a publicity opportunity, but they've become really, really popular in the last couple of years. And there are podcasts out there with thousands and thousands of listeners that can really give you terrific visibility. So I highly recommend not discounting podcasts and being interviewed on a podcast as a way to gain some really terrific exposure for your organization. And those generally work 2 to 4 months out. The most popular podcasts may be booking 6 months out. And I can tell you the one exception to TV and radio is many of the television and radio stations still have public service announcements. Where you can be interviewed, say on a public service show. These generally air very, very early in the morning on a Saturday or Sunday morning around 6 a.m., 6:30. And they often interview nonprofit organizations, and those usually book within a month or two out. And for those opportunities, you're going to want to contact the public service director at the TV and radio stations.
Alrighty, so now that we've talked a little bit about media pitching, let's get into press releases. And a press release is a formal announcement about your organization, and it's typically focused on a newsworthy topic, so things like a corporate partnership, new services, or a major award. And it's important to keep a press release to these formal announcements. You don't want to be sending out a press release about, basic services, features, or benefits of your organization, because that's not what a journalist is going to want to receive a press release about. And these days, a lot of press releases get sent out that really should be media pitches, and you'll have better luck of getting media coverage on those less newsworthy topics if you're sending out a media pitch versus a press release. So when it comes to putting together a press release, there's a few things you always want to include. First and foremost is the headline, and whereas a pitch is sent out as an email, a press release reads more like an article. So the headline that you're putting together should be more similar to an article headline than a pitch subject line. So you're going to want it, that being said, you're still going to want to include the most important information. So make sure your headline is clear about what the topic of your press release is. Make sure that it's something that will hook people in and get their attention. The other thing to include with a press release is a press contact. So this is a person at your organization who is going to be fielding any media inquiries that you get. And it's very, very important that this person is not only prepared to do this, but will be checking either their phone or their email address continually. Erika mentioned before that journalists are very busy people and they work on deadline, and you need to be getting back to them as soon as you can. So if they email you in the morning, you should be getting back to them that same morning. So if it's an email or a phone that's only going to get checked once a day, once a week, that's not going to be a great person to list on the press contact. You also want to include a date line. So this typically includes information about your location as well as the date the press release is going out. And different wire services or different there are different templates that you can use for this, but the basic information should always either include your city and state, just your state, or your general geographic location. And the good thing about press releases is if you Google press release template or press release example, there are plenty of examples out there, and you should be able to get exactly what you need from those. As far as the formatting. As far as the body copy, we would still recommend using the inverted pyramid model, so getting the most important information right up at the top. And a press release should be about 1 page in length, or maybe 1.5 pages. So make sure, and the other thing to include, to keep in mind with press releases is the only information that should be included is the most important information. You don't want to include any fluffy or kind of filler information, because it's going to make it harder for the journalist to find the information they really need. So only include the most important pieces of information in your press release. And then finally, at the very bottom, you want to include a boilerplate. And a boilerplate is essentially just contextual information about your organization, to give them a little bit more idea of who you are and what you're doing. And this is where you can include that extra information that you wouldn't want to include in the body copy of the press release. So, you know, when you were founded, any interesting information about your organization, who's the head of your organization, etc. And you also want to include the URL of your website and links to your social media handles as well.
So one of the questions that I get asked a lot is what exactly is the difference between a press release and a media pitch? And we actually have a blog article on the threegirlsmedia.com website that remains to be one of our most popular and most viewed and read year after year after year. And it covers this exact topic. And I know we've talked about each of these a little bit already, but let's just review so you're really clear on the difference between a press release and a media pitch and how they're both supposed to be used. So a press release is used for major announcements, and it's something that really needs to be newsworthy and stand out, not just the normal everyday operations of your nonprofit organization. It gets distributed into newsrooms, often to specific reporters as well. You can certainly post it on your website. And in terms of overall length, about 1 page, if you're thinking about an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, is normal length for a press release. Certainly can be shorter, but really shouldn't be much longer than that. You can also think about it as the equivalent of a short form blog article, or about 300 to 500 words is generally plenty. And a press release should never be sent all by itself. It should always be accompanied by a media pitch where you're going to write an email pitch, just a couple of sentences introducing the primary topic of the press release, and then let the journalist know in that email, I've pasted a press release below for all of the details. And then if they want all the details, they'll scroll below and read your entire press release. Now, a media pitch gives a reporter a story suggestion, but isn't necessarily a major event or happening. It can simply be introducing your nonprofit organization to the press. And it is an email that's highly personalized. And when I say highly personalized, I mean you don't want to start it by saying, hello, journalist. You really want to address it to Dear Susan, Dear Joe, somebody specific, be very personable. And it's sent to specific reporters and journalists via email. And it's email length, which generally means shorter is best. If you think about how you personally like to receive emails, if you open one up and it's a chunky 6 paragraphs long, you're probably going to go ugh and not want to read the whole thing. Journalists are exactly the same way. So think short, sweet, to the point. It can really be a teaser about a story. It doesn't need to include every last detail. It's designed to whet the appetite of the press and get them to pique their interest and say, oh, this looks interesting. I want to request more information. So not everything needs to be included. And it should always be sent with an EPK or electronic press kit. And we're going to get into what an EPK is here in just a moment. And a media pitch can be sent all by itself. It doesn't have to accompany a press release, but it certainly can. And let's move on now to EPKs and talk a little bit about those.
So an electronic press kit, also known as an EPK, is essentially a web page that gives journalists a one-stop place to get all of the information they need about your nonprofit organization. So it's going to include important things like who, what, when, where, and why. It's going to include high-res images that they can download and utilize in their articles, as well as additional contact information for people where they can contact for more if they need for their story. And as I mentioned, you want to be answering the who, what, when, where, and why about your organization, but there are some additional questions that you can answer in your EPK as well. So how can you be contacted? Include names, phone numbers, emails for the people who are going to be in charge of the media relations for your organization. What do you do and what makes you unique? Is there anything your nonprofit specializes in that needs to be explained? And this is especially important if you're in an area that's a little bit less self-explanatory. The more that you can give them up front, that makes it so they don't have to ask you these questions, the easier it will be for them to determine whether or not they want to move forward with your story. And it gives them a head start in creating their article so that when they do speak with you, they can get to the more important or in-depth questions right away. It's also helpful to sometimes include details about the people that volunteer for your organization, the people that lead your organization, or the people that you serve with your organization. And then also, how does your organization accept donations, or how can people get involved? This is especially important for nonprofits and not something we would necessarily recommend for a business, but it gives journalists extra information that they can include in their article without having to ask you for it. And then the last thing that we'd always recommend including in your EPK is, what about your nonprofit would make a great story? And this is another way to pitch them a little subtly, another idea for a story that they can take and run with. And again, it's all about just making their lives easiest, almost spoon feeding them the information they need to do what they do best. And here on the left, we've included a basic example of what a EPK might look like. So again, has the media contacts, has the what it is, some explanation about that. And then at the bottom, you can see we've included the URLs for their website as well as their Facebook and LinkedIn pages.
Something else you can always include in your EPK that's online is video. If you have B-roll from your organization or some kind of video that you've taken about your organization, you can certainly include it there for the media to use. And often an EPK is on a website under the About tab. It's a common place for journalists to look for more information, and you can have maybe a drop-down tab that says media on it. That's a great place to put the information in your EPK. All right, so let's talk a little bit about media advisories. And media advisories are kind of the unsung hero, I think, of media coverage, and something that a lot of people haven't heard about or don't quite understand how to use. And you can think of it almost as a sister document to a press release, in that it's a formalized document with a specific format. However, it's specifically designed and only ever used for events. So if you are wanting publicity about an event, you should not be writing a press release. You should be writing a media advisory. So a media advisory is sent to a journalist just like a press release, in hopes that they'll tell their audience about it, or maybe that they'll attend the event or something like that. The difference in formatting is that a press release is formatted in paragraph form, where you're actually writing solid paragraphs about the information. A media advisory is broken down literally in a who, what, when, where, why, and how format. So like a press release, you're going to have your headline up at the top, like 50th anniversary event coming up next month, or whatever your headline may be. And then below that, it's literally going to say what, colon, and then a quick sentence or maybe a sentence or two about the event, where, colon, and then the location, when, colon, and the time. So it's literally formatted as the 5 W's. And there's no need to write chunky paragraphs at all. You can send it cut and pasted below a brief media pitch. And in terms of sending these out to the press, the timeliness is absolutely key. So at Three Girls Media, when we're sending out media advisories for our clients, we use what I like to call the pleasant persistence method, which means that about 8 weeks in advance of the event, we're sending out the media advisory for the very first time. And we're letting the media know this is going to be happening in 8 weeks. We also send it out again to the same journalists 1 month in advance as a, hey, just a reminder, we wanted to make sure you didn't forget that this event's taking place on such and such day and time. And then again, 2 weeks in advance. And lastly, 2 days in advance. And you want to make sure to change up your subject line each time that you send the media advisory. The first time, maybe your whatever standard subject line you may choose to use. And then the second one, you may put reminder, colon, and then a new subject line to kind of pique their interest. Again, keep in mind that you're answering the 5 W's and that it's formatted that way. And the idea with the media advisory is to be concise. You don't have to write in chunky paragraphs. And just like a press release, you need to be extremely easy to reach. So make sure that your media contact information is up at the top of the media advisory, that you're providing not only an email address, but also a phone number where somebody's going to be really, really responsive to the press if they do contact you for more information.
Another document that you can utilize as part of your media relations strategy is a fact sheet. And a fact sheet is essentially a one page of vital information that journalists need when they're writing their stories about your organization. So this will include a URL to your EPK and other information that might be a little bit too much to include in a pitch or a press release. And it's really best suited to nonprofits that have demographic statistics or other information that you want to include in a story about your organization, but that would be too much to include in a pitch or other document.
The other thing I should say about a fact sheet really quickly is that they're generally done in bulleted format. So rather than paragraph form or the 5 W's for a media advisory, a fact sheet is generally bulleted. So it'll be a bullet and then a statistic, or a bullet and a fact. And it's literally just a list of quick hit bulleted information that the media can scan and read and absorb very easily. So let's talk a little bit about working with the press and how to go about doing that and making sure that your relationships are successful. So one of the most important things to keep in mind is that journalists are really, really busy people. Most of the time they're working on deadlines that are very hard set. They're often working on more than one story at a time. And when they need information, they need it now. So make sure that when you interact with them, that you're very timely, that if somebody is asking you for information, that you're providing that literally within an hour, if at all possible. You don't want to keep them waiting. Make sure that you're informative, meaning that if they ask you for some facts or figures or specific details, that you're providing them exactly what they asked for. And if you don't have it, one of the tricks that I always like to use is say, you know what, I don't have that information right now, but I'm happy to get it for you. Buy yourself a little bit of time so you can get that information and then get back to them ASAP. And if it's something you just don't have and you can't access or can't find out, be honest with the journalist and let them know that as well. They'll appreciate your honesty and won't feel like you're trying to beat them around the bush. Make sure that your interactions with them are impactful so that you're providing them with really helpful information and you're there as a resource. We've already mentioned this and it seems to go without saying, but definitely be polite. Please and thank you can go a really long way when it comes to working with the journalist and building relationships in the long run. And make sure that you show your appreciation. At Three Girls Media, whenever a media outlet or a journalist writes a story or covers one of our clients in the news media, we always follow that up with a handwritten thank you note. And we often include something in that thank you note. So for example, we have 3 Girls branded sticky notepads and pens, and journalists always need sticky notepads. So we'll handwrite a thank you note, we'll put in a couple sticky notepads and a branded pen and send that off. And you wouldn't believe over the years how many thank yous we've gotten for our thank yous from the journalists who are really, really appreciative when their work goes recognized and they feel like they were making a difference for someone. So keep in mind, those thank yous go a really long way. So if you have questions about anything we've talked about today, or you would like to discuss your specific nonprofit and some ideas that we may have for you in regards to getting media coverage, feel free to reach out to us. As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we do offer a complimentary 30-minute consultation. We generally do those over a Zoom video chat or a phone call, whatever's most convenient for you. My and Shanae's contact information is in the top left corner here. You can email us at these addresses. That 408 phone number is my direct cell phone line left from my holdover days in the San Francisco Bay Area where I'm originally from, but that's my mobile number. And then here's where you can reach all of us on social media. And so you can feel free to follow Three Girls, and we're regularly posting updates all about marketing and social media and branding and public relations and things that your organization may find helpful. So I encourage you to follow us online. And on that note, we're happy to open it up to questions and answer anything that may be burning on your mind. I don't know if Melissa made it back. I know Melissa was going to take a short break.
I don't think they have yet, but I'm looking in the chat to see if anyone put in any questions during the presentation, and I'm not seeing anything right off the bat. So if anyone has anything now that they'd like to ask, feel free to either drop that in the chat or take yourself off mute and ask that way, but we're happy to answer those questions.
Right. I don't see any questions. Excellent. That means we must have covered a lot, and hopefully it was great information that you found really helpful. If you haven't tried to get media coverage for your organization in the past, I encourage you to do so. It's something that's free. You don't have to pay for. It simply takes a little bit of time and legwork, but it's highly doable. Journalists are always looking for great stories about organizations that are really helping the community. And just one other tip that I can give you when you're constructing your media pitch and thinking about introducing your organization to the press. It's important to think about what makes your organization different. Why are you special? Are you the only organization in Thurston County that does what you do? Do you serve a population that nobody else is serving? Have you reached certain milestones in your service that maybe other organizations have not? And I don't mean in terms of reaching a certain milestone for donations, because that's not really newsworthy. I mean, have you served 50,000 people, or have you brought 100,000 meals to seniors, or something like that, that could really be thought of as newsworthy? What milestones does your organization have coming up? Is there a particular anniversary that you may be coming up upon? Do you have new leadership that's come into place that's an opportunity to gain publicity? Think about what makes you special and different, the area that you serve, the constituents that you serve, and those chances are going to be of interest to a journalist.
Oh, looks like we just got a question in actually. Jennifer says, my media needs are sometimes more urgent, getting blood donors to fill appointments. Is there a good way to reach out without offending the reporter for seemingly late asks?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think if there is something like that, like getting blood donors to fill appointments, which is certainly timely right now as medicine is more in the news with COVID and things of that nature happening, my suggestion would be putting urgent in the subject line at the beginning of your email pitch. So literally the word urgent in all caps, followed by a colon, and then blood donors needed today, or blood donors needed in 48 hours, or something like that, that's going to put the sense of urgency on it. And then again, at the beginning of your pitch, make sure you say, we're X organization, we need blood donors to fill these appointments in the next 48 hours. It's going to be critical for the supply in Thurston County. So I think it's perfectly fine. You just have to be upfront with the journalist that it is a really urgent request and draw their attention to that so they notice it right away. Great, I'm glad that was helpful. Any other questions? All right, well, on Melissa's behalf, I guess I will officially wrap it up for everyone. I really appreciate you joining us today. Feel free again to reach out to Shanae or myself if you'd like to arrange that complimentary 30-minute consultation so we can discuss your organization specifically. I'm glad that we were able to present this to you today, and we're going to be giving another workshop in September on, I believe it's about, Shanae, do you remember what the topic of that workshop is? Or
It's an overview of how to put together a marketing strategy, and kind of delving into a high level overview of kind of everything within that bubble.
Awesome. So look for that announcement coming out. That workshop's going to be in September at some point, and we'll look forward to hopefully seeing a lot of you there. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day. Bye, everyone.